Dario Argento once said, "Horror is like a serpent, always shedding its skin, always changing, and it will always come back." This is the Producers Lounge podcast, the best podcast online for tips and tricks on producing great film, television, and web content. Welcome back for Season 3, Episode 11, hosted and produced by GreaterAndGrander.com. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Joe Zaso, who has produced independent features and web content, including Building the Bad House, Seven Hells, and Joe Zaso's Cafe Himbo. We discuss bootstrapping your low-budget horror movie, being inspired by Italian horror such as Suspiria, and forging your own career in independent film. I first met Joe on the set of Virus X, which I line produced and was distributed by Lionsgate, and we share some of the incredible horror stories behind making horror. Here now is my conversation with Joe Zaso.
An active weekend because last night and tomorrow I'm doing extras for Blu-rays for films that I did years and years ago. So it's like climbing back into your past. And it's interesting, it's fun, but just recapturing people I haven't seen in 30 years and such, and reconnecting. So it's all this, it feels straight surreal. It's kind of like, going forward to going back at the same time.
No, absolutely. Like that, it's funny. That's the one thing nobody told me in film school. Like, whatever project you work on, it's going to follow you. It's going to just it's like It Follows, where it will just chase you slowly throughout time, and you'll never be rid of it.
Yeah. No, Haunty. I mean, that's why I always choose your roles and make your choices with care. I should always say, choose your words with care.
How is the Blu-ray process going? Like, how involved are you in that? Are these projects that you acted in, or that you produced, or what have you?
They actually are all the above. Actually, these are ones I did a while ago. But what's great is my own label, which I use anymore, is not distributing. It's real distributors. So it's nice because they actually came to me, and that's why it's becoming like this full circle thing where now it feels good to not have to distribute your own stuff anymore and have people actually come to you and say, we want to do this, this, and this. Just do you mind being involved? Do you mind just making yourself available for that? And that's great. But the ones that I'm doing tomorrow are for movies I did back in the 80s when I was a teenager with on VHS. I mean, completely unwatchable, completely unmarketable till now. And now all of a sudden they're seen as a sort of relic, retro. One person said expressionist art from the mind of a 13-year-old who's not, dictated by anything, So it's like, I'm like sitting there like, I don't get it, but okay. So meeting my composer that I had, a real composer, and we haven't seen each other in 33 years. And now, he's hitting 70, and I'm going to be going to Pennsylvania tomorrow to this very lovely, an hour from New York. So I'm in Manhattan. So, but it's interesting.
And I did see a couple of trailers for some of your early stuff, like Scream Book and 5 Day Off.
Yeah, that's what.
Nice.
The 80s, and one of them's a musical, and I can't sing, but apparently they're releasing a final album from this to boot. I'm like, it's just like, am I like some alternate universe? I just,
Well, you know how that works. Like I've been watching a lot of like Broadway YouTube videos lately. So like, there's a revival and a Blu-ray and then releasing a vinyl, and then there's going to be an off-Broadway presentation of Scream Book coming up, I'm sure.
I really believe anything, especially the way things are going these days. It's what a difference 30 or 40 years makes, because 10 or 20 doesn't do anything. It's when you get, because now we're so removed from things, and technology and people have changed so much that everything feels so different. It just plays differently. Like it's interesting, it's fun, but it's also at the same time, stuff that we love doesn't play as well anymore. It's incredible.
Yeah, you really don't have any control about what hits and what doesn't, huh?
No, that's what's mysterious. So I mean, especially in this day and age of Kardashians and bachelors and all that stuff, I just sit there going, I have no interest at all. But there are people that eat, sleep, and breathe it. So I mean, it's like it's religion to them. So I don't always have a grasp on the pulse of people's tastes.
Well, it's interesting too, because you've all, I did the research on this for this interview, and I remember when we were making Virus X, you had talked about the stuff that you'd done, in horror. But looking at your IMDb now, I had no idea how much horror you've worked on. Like it's a ton of horror films.
I don't even watch that much horror anymore. It's funny. I'm what they call a horror himbo, because it's so made. Like some people are scream queens. I'm a horror himbo. Which with the basis of I write, I've probably seen I write cookbooks and under named Cafe Himbo, which is because I became such a horror person, But I like horror. I mean, I did see Halloween Ends, which I liked, and I saw the new Argento movie, which I like. But really, I don't chase after as many horror things as I used to, and I'm not involved in as many horror things. But the horror world is where I started, and it's where a lot of friendships and things came from. So I've always embraced it. So I just not racing out to see the next Insidious movie because it's just, it's nothing against it. I just, I'd rather watch BBC Channel or something.
Totally. I'm exactly in the same boat. So with that being said, where'd you grow up?
Rob, in case you can't tell by the accent, I came from Long Island,
Ah,
which I've managed to somewhat filter out. I occasionally get rid of, but yeah, I grew up in Long Island in places like Manhasset Hills, Mineola, places that you will see in Screenbook and all the other movies I ever made. So, and Rockville Center was the last stop, and now Manhattan.
that is so crazy. I grew up in Connecticut, but I actually was born in Manhasset. Um,
All
wow.
right, good town.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's
grow
fled.
uh-huh. Yeah, so like growing up in Long Island, what was your experience like back in the 70s and 80s?
I mean, I'm sure like any kid who grew up in suburbia, I know I just saw it for what it was. I didn't see it as suburbia. I just saw it as my home. I strip malls and things like that. We're not, and I we didn't have vans yet until the '80s. We didn't have soccer moms yet, so I was kind of in the station wagon age. Where my father had an Oldsmobile, and that was the whole. We went to the movies like regular movie theaters. We didn't
Mhm.
have. I'm sure like yourself, we didn't have. I guess like today, it feels like a theme park everywhere you go, but it was just very standard.
Mhm.
You went to the malt shop, all those kind of places. The malls were not what they are now. Now they were just simple malls like Roosevelt Field and the Miracle Mile, all those places. And I did have a big knowledge of movies and horror movies simply because of the newspapers. You know,
Mm.
um, my dad worked in Manhattan, and every so often, like for certain events, we would go into the city, and that's where I would see marquees and things. But really, Newsday and New York Times, those were my windows to movies because I didn't read magazines like they have now, even movie magazines like they had in the '80s and '90s.
Mhm.
And, of course, there's no internet. There was no, I remember going to the library and reading like Screen World, like just seeing, but the movies that I thought I'd never see the light, the day, for me, would never see the light of day. So that was, it was kind of, I wouldn't say sheltered, but I was kind of kept from the big part of the world. I went to Catholic school, so that in itself should tell us a lot. At least for the bulging eyes at all times, like yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am. Because I will never wear an Oxford shirt ever again because that was part of my uniform.
And was it in this Catholic school where you like first fell in love with entertainment, or was that purely from like the newspapers
Oh,
that you
from
got?
birth. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I remember just to show how weird I am. I used to pretend the refrigerator. These like 5 years old. I used to pretend the refrigerator was a movie marquee, and if I knew, for example, like for say the movie Shampoo was coming out, and
Uh-huh.
I know that they put the movie theater letters up at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, I would be there sneaking out of bed, taking my magnetic letters and writing the word shampoo on the thing on the refrigerator because I pretended it was a movie thing. It's marquee, and so I've always had it in my blood. I've always watched movies, even during my grammar school days into my high school days. It's always been there in a different. It kept changing shape, but it's always the spirit was always there. And I discovered much later in life that there are a lot of kindred souls out there just like me, very much like me, who listen to Morricone soundtracks that I thought nobody else listened to, because I was the weird kid that had the Exorcist 2 soundtrack, and everybody else was listening to Kiss, so and Meatloaf and all that, and so, but I discovered later on, like the movie Suspiria, I thought nobody but me knew what this movie was until you guess what? There's a billion people that are just like you. So it took a little time.
That is really cool. And then going back to what we just discussed, you started working on Screenbook in the early 80s.
Mhm.
Um, was that and you said earlier like some like a 13-year-old. Like how old were you when you worked on
Actually, I was 13. I started up. I had
Oh.
made some other little home movies before then, but the one that this is when we actually became feature length and started to get a little bit serious.
Uh-huh.
But I had just turned 13 and in '83, and then beginning of '84 is when I began my journey. And I was so into the movie Creep Show back then. I mean, it
Oh.
still am, but back then it's like that was my Citizen Kane. That was like the important movie of my life, and I wanted to make my own version of it. So it was like a creep show. Like there were 5 stories, and except it had an original score that had horrendous cinematography. It's like I think Mike was here and very cheap, but it had costumes, all those things. But the thing is, the cast was made up of young people playing older people, so it's kind of like Bugsy Malone meets Creep Show.
Eh.
And it was green video, but it had its energy and charms in its own way. But but it was clearly a lot of it was ripping off Creepshow, and I tried to do my own version of like the comic book panels, which obviously drawn on poster paper or something. But because if you take it as kind of like a glorified school project, maybe you get into it more. But as one person said, it's the expressionist art from the pure mind of a 13-year-old, undictated. I was like, okay, well, if you can get anybody to swallow that, go ahead.
Well, that is really cool that it has legs like that. And then of course when you were still on the East Coast, still in Long Island, eventually you moved out into bigger and better things. Did you start did you start by looking for acting roles in New York? What was your first step
Well,
after like high school?
I was still, I had just graduated college and I was still on Long Island. I was on Long Island until I was about 38. So I was there
Hmm.
for a bit. I still had another like 20 years to go. But I had been acting in as an extra. And I
Hmm.
went out to Hollywood when I graduated college that summer and started I was just, like a fish out of water. I started taking extra roles in things like Indecent Proposal, Dragon, the Bruce Lee stories, the summer of '92.
Ah.
And then I just started doing some plays on Long Island. And when I say semi-professional, you were paid to do it, but it wasn't Broadway. It was like off Broadway. And then what happened is when as I graduated, I was around 24. I decided I didn't like just getting extra roles anymore. I wanted to get more substantial roles. I figured, you know what, I'll produce my own movie, but using my old filmmaking skills, but with filmmakers I went to school with. So
Hmm.
it would be much better cinematography, better directors, better that. I would just do the producing and the acting and did it all along.
Hmm.
And the first project I did was a movie called Five Dead on the Crimson Canvas, because by then I started to fall in love with Italian horror. And what I did was, one of my classmates, Joe Parda, had this script, and he had this, first draft of a giallo he wrote called Five Dead on the Crimson Canvas. And I read it. And although I'm not usually an impulse shopper, I just read it. I said, I got to make this into a movie. We just have to expand it more.
Hmm.
And we had like $25,000, not much money at all, but it was a Sean Super 8, which was already a challenge because you had to get film and had to get splicing tape, and the movie was silent, so it literally had to be redubbed, though, just like the old Italian movies. But we didn't have a guide track, so I mean, I really had to watch time code and really be careful. It worked. It was like making the movie twice, basically, and it was not. It was made like with a video camera facing a TV set with the time code, and people would say their lines
Uh-huh.
and practice, and it worked. But it just, it
I
was a
wait,
challenge.
I'm a bit confused when you say like people are looking at a screen for time code. I don't quite understand. What do you mean by that?
The actors, for example, they had to come back and redouble their lines.
Oh,
The
ADR,
movies
got
had
it.
silence. And then basically, I mean, every sound effect, every Foley, everything had to be recreated. But the actors literally had to come back and, and this, of course, is grainy, Super 8
Mhm.
film. So many of the people in the film were very cool with it, but some were serious actors who just didn't think it was acting because they had to go through this strange process. But again,
Uh,
people saw it as a form of art. Like, okay, this is different. It's surreal. It's kind of like 60s, kind of
mhm.
experimental film, so they kind of started as that. And and it again, it's not without its flaws galore, but it's still won a bunch of awards and made its rounds in the beginning. And to this day now, it's suddenly becoming, I want to say cult classic, but people know of it. So it's not like when we first started, I was trying to push it off as something more, commercial. And, it was kind of like people were just kind of like, oh, it's this cheap little Sean video thing, and, they didn't really, again, they didn't want to give it the attention that's getting now. It's because of, fan interest in the internet, because this was just before the internet kicked in. So
Mhm.
that's one thing that's been a tool, is the internet, because that's how people know about these things and learn. And I think even that's how I became involved with Virus X. I mean, it's because I knew somebody who was on MySpace, who knew somebody who was, so it was all that one step after another.
Right. Well, not to jump off of uh things like that. When you were first starting out and you're producing something like Five Dead on the Crimson Canvas, you mentioned you have raised $25,000. And of course that's the biggest producing conundrum is how do you raise money for these, low budget indie films, which by the way, in today's dollars, that's roughly double. That's approximately like $50,000.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
It
I'm
was
Mhm.
it was Joe and I had gone 50-50 on it, basically. And between the two of us, a lot of it was just me saving part of my salary. And as I was like, because I also was living on Long Island, I was living on cornflakes. So I was, I didn't have I think my car insurance is the most expensive thing. And it was a combination of that. Some people would, invest like $1,000, but it all, as worked its way up. I mean, it was over the course of 2 years, and now I look back at it, I mean, it sounds like a bargain, but but it wasn't easy. I was like, because I wasn't making, I had a regular day job,
Mhm.
and I wasn't making lawyer salaries or things like that. So it was like I could just save one paycheck and you're done. No, it was challenging because everything was done really the hard way. Nothing. We had, even when it came to renting things or borrowing things or all these strange logistics just to be able to do things. Yeah, as people know in low budget films,
Mhm.
it's so much harder when you can't just pick up the phone and just make an arrangement, or dial it and get car service, get this person that, get the costumes from here, or have them messengered over. Oh boy, it's a whole other, so much more work and so much. But that's what it took to get that off the ground. So otherwise, it wouldn't have.
The old beg, borrow, and steal, right?
Everything, big bro, cheat and steal whatever it takes. You know.
So at this point, you're living in Long Island and going into New York. You've got a finished feature under your belt. This is the mid 90s during the independent film boom of the 90s. What happens next? Where do you go next?
Well, after the film was finished, it was distributed by a company called EI. At the
Mhm.
time, they did a lot of shot on video things, and that was kind of a new phenomenon. People making features on shot on video, and they actually got releases and no big bucks. It just got its way out in VHS.
Mhm.
And then they started doing more features with the people that had already worked with on video this time.
Mhm.
And one thing led to another, and then other filmmakers saw me for my acting skills, and and they would say to me, "We want to be in my film," and everybody just kept like loaning each other. Everybody served, they helped each other. It's like somebody who may have hired me as a director would be my DP on the next movie. It was like everybody's kind of swirling around, and then after a while, it was the same thing over and over. I started distributing films myself, but I started doing more projects, a little more production value, but it was more or less the same thing. It was low budget,
Right.
but it just kept getting a little better, a little better, a little more commercial. And then DVDs came in, and all those other things came into play. So it's just like it's starting to advance really.
Okay. I want to actually kind of touch on that and go in a little more detail on that, because I think a lot of times with these stories, like the timeline is important. Like too often I remember, like I'll go and I'll hear a writer speak and they say, I started working on this show, and then eventually NBC, this executive at NBC, gave me a shot to pitch a whole series by myself. And in your mind, you're like, well, was that 2 weeks? Was that 2 years? How did that long it last? And I'm curious what that process was for you in terms of going from producing shot on video horror, and in some cases comedy horror, and then transitioning into being a self distribution company.
I would say, real run no numbers, between 94 and 2000 is
Hmm.
when I was doing most of the shot and video things
Uh-huh.
myself, and producing, and having other people distribute them, or try to find other people to distribute them.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until 2004, because I had done acting between 2000 and 2004,
Hmm.
well, all exclusively,
Right.
that I decided to start distributing the movies on my own label, Cinema Image Productions,
Hmm.
because it was new. DVD was new, and I
Hmm.
figured I would have more. Even though I didn't have nearly as many channels as these other people like Baker Taylor and all that, at least I knew I held the DVD in my hand. I knew exactly where they were going and who was going to be buying them, and it was more work. But I had that in its, distributing in itself is a job. But that's what I did. I really spent those years mostly producing new films and distributing them on DVD, and acting in some of them, here and there. So I'd say between 2004 and 2009.
Yeah.
That was the 'cause I made a vow on my 40th birthday in 2010. I said I'm not going to make any more camcorder movies, as a friend of mine calls them, and I started just acting in short films and writing cookbooks, and then eventually I started helping with producing other small projects, but not features anymore. Really, I haven't done those in a while. It's mostly just been acting in small films, assisting with producing other people's small films, like short films,
Hmm.
and cookbooks. Yeah, that's really been the last. I'd say the last. Where are we? 12 years.
Got it. Got it. And I'm curious, out of all the features you worked on and produced, what was your favorite experience?
Maybe experience. The ones I produced myself, even though it was really hard. Five Down the Crimson Canvas, because it was special. It was like one of those things. Like it was like you were young, you were crazy, you had energy, you didn't know what you were doing. You'd sacrifice anything because you wanted to. I don't think I could ever do that again because it just took too much out of me. I get tired very quickly now. That was a happy experience, and I would say strictly as as a producer. As an actor, I would say I did a movie in Italy called Demonium, which I only acted in, but that was also one of the happy experiences. It was just one of those, like, you look back at it, it's like that was charming. It was, you're making a movie with Germans in Rome. It was like spaghetti movies. Like it was like climbing into a dream.
Oh wow, that sounds fun. Let me ask also then on Five Dead on the Crimson Canvas, what did you learn the most from that as a producer?
Learn Okay. The thing I learned from that most, just to always be organized. I mean, staying organized is extremely essential.
Hmm.
When you have low budget movies, and unfortunately, you have to do things really carefully. You can't improvise as much. Yeah, you have to improvise, but you can't stray from your plan. Also, because you have to keep your budget in place.
Hmm.
I will talk about this after, but where a movie called Nikos the Impaler went flying off the rails. That's one of the most difficult line producing jobs one will ever have. But Five Dead taught me about that, keep staying organized and such. And to go back, the movies I made in the 80s,
Mm.
the screenbook and all those, even though, there were an artistic triumph, the thing it taught me more than anything else, which I take with me to this day, is how to plan for plan B and plan C and plan D. In your mind, if you hear something going wrong, or you just hear somebody say, so and so is going to be late, or oh my God, we're
Mhm.
losing the light, it's going to rain. What do we do? You start thinking, okay, let's do this first. Or if she's going to be late, and we can't film her scenes till later, do this first. Or, we're just going to have to film all the,
Yeah.
one angle shots first, and you teach yourself how to prepare for any eventuality. If you have to improvise, if you have to, suddenly change your plans, it's be spontaneous. You learn, like, especially if you're waiting for a subway to get to your train, it's like, okay, the subway's late. Now what do I do? You have to know, okay, take that line, which will take
Mhm.
you there and you won't be late. So
Another great
that's what I learned, just how to improvise.
Got it, got it. Another great trick, by the way, is cover sets. I'm sure you've dealt with this, but particularly in the Northeast, changes in weather happen frequently. We don't have that as much in Los Angeles, but in the Northeast, if weather changes, you generally, as a line producer, you want to schedule all of your outdoor sets first, and you have what's called a cover set in case there is bad weather, and it's basically a nearby indoor set that you can shoot a similar scene with the same actors and just kind of rearrange your schedule according to the weather. So,
You're
um,
exactly. We had a few, though. There've been an extra on some movies where that's happened. I think one of them was Tu Wong Fu, which they filmed at Old Westbury Gardens. I remember the first 2 days it rained. It was an outdoor scene, but they didn't shoot anything. But I remember they just had everything ready. They just, they had everybody ready just in case. They did have another thing set up, but they didn't pursue that. They just decided to wait an extra day. But and they got money, they could do that. But that happened, and that always makes your heart sink. You're like, ugh, because it's just, especially when you have everything ready just perfectly, and then Mother Nature just decides, no, I'm gonna, change my mind and not take my meds today.
so with that being said, my next question, and you might have already started to answer this, is what was your of everything you've worked on as a producer, what was your least favorite experience?
There I say, it was the film Nikos the Impaler, without a doubt. And we were shooting it exactly 20 years ago this time, and it was a very hard undertaking. It was a lot. It was very challenging. And as a line producer, I was a line producer, actor, driver. I also was the costume designer. It was all of everything. And it was a lot of work I took on, which would have been a little better if not for some of the people who made the film. I shall remain nameless, but let's just say they could have been a lot more cooperative and a lot more, you know, genteel and all those things, but just made it a lot harder than it needed to be. And then, especially when you have shoots that are 24 hours each, where people are, more or
Wait,
less,
what? What?
some of the
24
some of
hours?
them some of them ran some went that far, because some people, they don't stop until they they don't understand that they're given limits. It's not a union film, but that doesn't mean you can just have whatever you want. So yeah, it got crazy. It got a little out of control, especially that, the main producer was over in Germany and really didn't
Uh,
check in. And he kind of just let other people do what they wanted, and of course I could have opened my mouth and said something, but I think it was just that we were just so interested in getting things done. And it was just, after a while, you just, like I said, you felt it would be counterproductive to stop things and just say, okay, well, this is a problem. And, you just want to keep going. You just wanted to, you felt like pacifying things would make things just move and not, so it was just, it was just a tremendous undertaking. And it was just to the point where some people just didn't understand. You don't have unlimited everything. You can't just keep saying, if you need more blood, you don't have 40 gallons more waiting. You can't do 500 takes just because, you are who you are. You can't take 15 hours to light a scene, which is overlit anyway. And that's what I'm saying when I think getting out of control was just nobody was tightening the reins anywhere. So it was just,
right.
and as line producer, I was just doing what I was told to do. But at the same time, I really could have used somebody to be there to say, "How's everything going? Are you okay? Are they okay?" Instead of just you know,
And how,
um,
and let me ask from that experience, what did you learn the most from Nikos the Impaler?
get an escape clause on your contract. Read, find it. That is the first thing I will tell everyone. Make sure you have an escape clause, or
What
just
what does an escape clause look like? I'm
I
curious.
don't know, but people tell me, they said, "Didn't you have an escape clause?" I mean, I remember the contract I was given was like a novel. It was like
Oh my
because
God.
the producer was also a lawyer, so I mean, he had he also kind of was his own, and it was very professional, but at the same time, it was kind of a combination. We have one person being extremely professional and yet others behaving unprofessionally, so it was just like a mess.
Yeah.
And But I think everybody on the set, even though they were drained and they were tired and they were, just like, oh, I can't go. At the time, they were enthusiastic. Once the movie was done, they were just they couldn't stop talking about it. They couldn't stop. They wanted to let the world know they were a part of it. And movie's terrible. It's funny, but it's terrible. It's I remember on the set Barricade, they said, Joe, you must be free of this nightmare. So they handed me the big beer and they said, we're going to watch Nikos together and you're going to laugh and you're going to make all the bad feelings go away. It helped, but it was just, it was just so much, emotionally brutal. It was physically brutal. So I think by the end of it, I wanted to give up film altogether. Period. I didn't want to watch or act or do anything anymore. I didn't want to watch movies. I remember even towards the end of the shoot, I would watch my favorite Argento movies and just look at them like, oh, they're horrible, horrible experience. Everything about them is ugly. It's like I was seeing the hard parts of it. I'd seen work behind it. So that's what I have that board to. That's what it did to me. So it got me so I don't want to say traumatized, but it just got me so shaken that it took a couple of years for me to finally just say, you know what? Now I want to do it again. It's like I think it was Roger Corman who said, making movies is like sex. It makes you really, really tired and feel spent. Sooner or later, you can be back for more. You will. Yeah. It's like you keep coming back for more.
Yeah. So speaking of keep coming back for more, then what? Well, actually, first, I agree with you. Like I've been on shoots where my supervisor, whether it was the executive producer or the creative producer, was really empathetic and understanding and worked with me. And I've also been on shoots where they were distant or outright combative. And I can say without a doubt, having a senior producer who knows what they're doing and is like cool and calm and confident makes all the difference on set. It's incredible.
Absolutely, yes. It's not going to be. You don't want to be coddled. You don't want to be like you have to have nursemaiding and all that stuff. And we know shoots all get difficult, but I mean, I just think some people just make it so needlessly difficult. You can't do that at this level. It's not going to any level, but especially when it's everybody's. I remember one person on Nico's complained that one of the higher ups, I should say, saying, I didn't realize this production was so favor based. A lot of people were doing this as a favor, and I felt like saying to them, well, how do you think you're going to get people to do all these things for you? You're not paying them very much, and you're making huge demands, and they're doing it for you out of love. You need favor based. I mean, they felt like saying like you felt betrayed. Like why couldn't you hire them real people with real salaries? It's because there are no real salaries. You can't offer them 2 cents an hour. It's like they would have rather that than to just think of it as because to them the favor part wasn't flattering. They just saw that as it didn't. It was little things like that. After a while, you're just shaking your head and you're like, I don't like this. Really. And now people to this day say, why am I not in a rush to produce anymore? I said, it's mostly personalities. It's not just energy. It's just when you deal with so many, all different, whether it be actors or all different behind the scenes people, it just in general, it's not just filmmaking, in real life in general. It just gives you such a headache. You're like, I don't have the patience or the will for this anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's just too many personalities is what makes the project hard. So you gotta have a definite synergy and a harmony. And like last night I was doing this thing for the Blu-ray of Guilty Pleasures. Speaking to one of my actresses, Sasha Graham, she was so she was so enthusiastic, and other people I know were enthusiastic about working on that film. And that's when you need that kind of energy because it makes you all work better. When you're all in the same, in the same wavelength. But when people just start, like you said, working against each other and start, being unreasonable, that's when it just becomes like this. I really just don't want to do this anymore. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
So that's my attitude towards unfortunately my cynical attitude towards producing new things. It's
And I think indie horror is especially difficult because you have low budgets, low pay, sometimes inexperienced crew, night shoots. Fake blood is awful to work with. I remember when we were on Virus X, I remember we had that pump system that was coming out of your shirt.
Yeah, twice I had it. First one,
and I'll paint the picture for people who have not seen the movie, but we set up a hose to shoot fake blood out of your chest to fake a gunshot, and twice, as you mentioned, the hose was not set up correctly, and it just splatted up and sprayed up all corn syrup all onto your neck.
Warm. The room was really warm. There was no ventilation.
Oof.
But then the second shot, beautiful, and I didn't care that there was no padding on the floor. It fell. I didn't care. It was just I enjoyed the Virus X. I did enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Although it's my little niece, when she saw the movie for the first time, one of the actors was rolling around screaming. You're like, oh, he's dying and dying slowly. Finally, she said, "Oh, for God's sake, will you just die already?" She just like that was your only complaint, I
So
enjoyed it. I always remember that movie as a director was great.
yeah, so with that being said, horror is difficult. Why do you think people keep coming back to horror?
You mean to make horror? You mean or watch
To make
horror?
horror, to watch horror, to all of
Well,
that.
horror. I say, well, horror for a thing from a producer standpoint, they're always marketable. People always want to see horror films, and we not just Halloween time, and they always do. There's always and a lot of the horror films are the same, more or less, same formulas, but people keep coming back. It's like I have to have a new the new flavor of the month. They're fun to make. I know a lot of actors who are not into horror films who have said to me, I don't watch these things, but I enjoy making them. It's so much they're fascinating and they're fun. And they said I wouldn't watch this if I wasn't in it, but they said, but definitely it was enjoyable and fascinating overall. So I think there's always that they get some type of enrichment from it in that direction.
Mm,
Um, I think film writers and directors, especially ones who love horror, always have a story to tell. It may be some kind of new technology or new attitude that they can work into, or new conspiracy in the world that they can work into their stories. And there's always going to be, I say, horror just keeps changing form.
mhm,
As Laurie Strode said, evil changes shape. It does, because it's horror the same way. It has a different way of always presenting itself, even though it may seem cliched, but there's always going to be a modern, a fresh voice for horror. I think
mm.
it's one of the most reliable genres of them all.
Interesting,
So
interesting.
yeah. It's also
Uh,
one more interesting. I mean, I think relationship movies, we have enough of those. We don't need them. We have that in real life. We don't need more.
you mean romantic comedies or
Or just romantic comedies or movies where people are fighting, couples breaking up, or don't even get into Hallmark. It's another, that's a whole other
Ah,
ballgame. But they're successful. But I mean, movies where you just kind of, I know some people just feel the need to, and again, I'm not poo-pooing, but people have a need to see things that maybe they can somehow relate to, even if it's something in real life that they're suffering from. They just have to be able to identify with something they see. So that's why I'm not always into the movies where people are fighting and have bad marriages, and that's the basis of the whole movie. It's
mm,
to me, it's just unpleasant and boring. But for some people, it's kind of therapeutic. So yeah,
got it.
that's not my favorite genre, but I'd say that people do get some kind of a charge out of that.
Okay. So after Nikos, after Barricade, after your stint in horror, what I noticed on here, something that stood out in your resume was Building the Bad House, a documentary short on the making of Penny Dreadful.
A friend of mine, Brian Norton, actually is I made that film. I was involved with distributing that film. Yeah, later on. And since then I actually produced one of his shorts, which in due time for Halloween was called Jack Attack. So I co-produced that one. That was
Mhm.
the last producing effort I did. But yeah, Penny Dreadful, I did not work on the actual making of that film. I was involved in the distribution of it.
Got it. Got it. Sounds good. Cool. And then what's interesting is, and you touched on this earlier, you kind of pivoted at a certain point away from horror, and you started making Cafe Himbo. What is Cafe Himbo?
Cafe Himbo, because I've always loved cooking and I've actually catered on sets to save money. So it's another producing skill. Back in the, I'd say around 2010, during the winters, it would be freezing. I didn't want to go outside. So I'd be really dabbling in cooking. And one thing that really inspired me was actress Jessica Harper,
Mhm.
who, from Suspiria and, Family of Paradise. She also writes, and she's a humorist, and she wrote a cookbook called the Krabby Cook Cookbook. And I just found it so delightful because it's a good cookbook. It's user friendly for a lot of people, but it has very interesting anecdotes. And I just fell in love with this book and everything about it. So it inspired me to do something like that. And I decided to have like a blog. So and I decided, okay, it's going to be a Facebook page or a group.
Uh-huh.
And I thought about different names. I said, well, people always call me a horror himbo, so why don't we call it Cafe Himbo? And it was just in an instant. That's what I thought about. And at the same time, everything was happening very quickly this particular winter. It's 11 years ago. And I decided, someone said, why don't you have little videos? And I said, and with the help of Brian, I put on these little quick, kind of, I know what to call them, like little recipe shows where someone I know, somebody famous, somebody that was on, there's somebody in Friday the 13th or Amityville 2 or, Demons or Argento movie would happen to be in town and we came in as a guest and would talk briefly about that person's career and just, be silly. And then she'd say, okay, I have a recipe and I had everything all laid out and say, how do we make this? And she goes, this, and this. And I would go out and say, I'll be right back. And I come back with the finished product. I wouldn't actually prepare it for you while we were talking. We just talk about it. So as one person said, it's the best cooking show without any cooking, just without any actual cooking. You just bring it when it was just being silly. But then I decided I was supposed to act in this film to be done in Arizona. That didn't happen. I was just I can't stand this. I'm so mad. I'm going to do something. So I decided I'm going to write my own cookbook and I'm going to self-distribute it. And that was the first book, the first Cafe Himbo book. And half the recipes come from people like I said, all these cult movie people that I know from Black Christmas and, people like Lynn Griffin. people from Friday the 13th. So it was just being fun. It was not a very plain book. It was not, at all elaborate, but it led to another book and another book. Next thing you know, we're on our eighth book. And I've had the help of other, writers. And of course, they went from being like these pamphlet kind of books to now being glossy, full color books.
Mhm.
So that's how Cafe Himbo happened. And because I've been with it for so long, it's almost become a brand for me. It's almost like a running joke. Like, Cafe Himbo is the guy running around wearing just an apron, and he's campy and he has campy guests. And that's what Cafe Himbo means. It's just silliness and fun and cooking. It's not Emerald. It's not trying to be any of those things. It's not Martha Stewart, but it's just Cafe Himbo is kind of like, like it's code for like silly, campy, undressed, all those things. It's like,
Yeah, if I recall the cover, I've seen these pop up on your Facebook. Is the cover is you with a chef's hat and apron and wearing nothing else.
Yeah.
Um,
Shorts, yes, but
Yeah,
but it's like that's but that's in each cover more or less, and there's always all the books not only have fun and nostalgia in them, but there's always at least a little innuendo, nothing trashy, but it's like little bits of innuendo. One book is called Breakfast in Bed with Cafe Himbo. And you have like having a little, it's just silliness. So that's the spirit of it. There's a restaurant in New York. I don't know if it's on the West Coast either, but it's called Big Daddy's. And it's very nostalgic. It's all like, if you like TV, you go in there and there's all these old cereal boxes, and you got the dating game, psychedelic flowers on the wall and those things. It's all for people that love nostalgia and TV. You have the salad section of the menu. So it's called Green Acres. All kinds of goofy things. If they made a cookbook, this would more or less be that with a little more innuendo thrown in. So that's the spirit of it. So that was just unexpectedly, it became like a side thing, and it became a character or brand, an alter ego or whatever you want to call it. So I am multi-layered.
there you go.
Complex.
Well, I absolutely agree, and I think not only are you multi-layered and complex, but I think you have a unique vantage and a unique experience that not a lot of people have in terms of you have self-distributed and you've built up your own brand from scratch. As you said, you have had 8 books at this point. If somebody is getting into film or entertainment or the attention marketplace, as some people call it now, and they want to build up a brand or they want to self-distribute their work, what advice would you give to them? Like, what is the key things that maybe you learned along the way, or maybe screwed up along the way?
Well, one of the things I learned along the way, which a lot of people are doing in general now, because this whole social media age, is self-promotion. I mean, some people have nothing to promote but themselves, just standing there. But I think that same incessant self-promotion, because you can't. The hardest part about promoting, you have to do it a lot. You have to keep, you can't do it too much, but yet you have to do it a lot, and you have to do something to catch someone's eye because everyone's doing it. That's the problem. Everybody's got their own angles. You have people with the most elaborate, ads and promos and things, far stronger than anything I ever did. And if you have those tools, that's great. You have to have something also to go with it, something solid to promote. But I think the key to it is a lot of self promotion. If you're doing it on the a low level, because we all can't afford billboards. I'm always saying. So we have to somehow stand out. But the problem is, there's such a glut of, like I said, there's such a glut of people doing it now. It's hard to, how do you stand out? So you almost have to get yourself a press junket, PR junket. You have to somehow work a publicity stunt, or try to get to know some celebrity of some sort that can somehow endorse you. Somebody has a talk show. It can somehow become their special guest who's a regular person. It's or and like I say, everybody's got their own publicity. Everybody's doing things, but the trick is just what is going to be your angle that's going to grab people. So I really think a lot of it is publicity, and I think also there really needs to be a need to do a quality product, because I think some people are also so caught up in the publicity, and they don't want to be famous, they don't want to be successful, but they don't really care about what they're making. They just care about just the glory of making it, having it made and having it celebrated. But it's okay, you're celebrating your movie, but your movie isn't that special, or there's nothing to it. You should be focusing more on that, and then, or have somebody else do your promoting, so you can, you don't compromise.
Yeah, I agree. And you and I both coming from the film world, we both know that there's a lot of crap out there, to be blunt. Let me ask you something, as I've had this theory. I haven't tested it. I'm wondering if you've done something similar, or if you've had any benefit to this, or maybe I'm going to tell you this theory and you're going to tell me I'm completely wrong, which is like, completely understandable. But in this kind of fractured media world, if you're a smaller creator, is there advantage to going on, and you said create your own press junket, going on and kind of creating your own interview junket by going to a bunch of smaller podcasts, maybe podcasts or YouTube channels or these smaller interview shows that only have 1,000 followers or even 100 followers in order to get the word out there?
I definitely think so. I think one thing, not just myself, but with other people, I think the best thing to do is keep doing. Anytime there's a podcast, anytime there's an interview, every time somebody asks you to be on the show or interview article, do it, because the more you do it, the more you're seen. After a while, people are going to start to, I want to say, give you credibility. If I find you credible, but I think that's the whole thing. Is when they see you over and over again, they're going to start to realize, oh, who is this person? What is he doing? Maybe I should check him out. And that's the thing. If you do it 5, 10, 20 years, people are going to realize you're serious about what you do, and you're not just, promoting for the day, or you have this great new song and you're gonna listen to it and then you're never gonna hear from me ever again. It's
Mhm.
I think just keep infiltrating yourself into people's memories and minds. And it's like, it's almost like it's like the same thing with products. If you keep showing the product over and over again, it's gonna eventually go into someone's subconscious.
Mhm.
And like, for example, like let's suppose you're somebody who you may not necessarily need this particular like furniture polish. If it's something you don't need right now,
Mhm.
but it's like pledge. But the thing is, if you one day find yourself needing furniture polish, you say, "Oh, I need pledge." Like it'll be in your mind because it's
Mhm.
found its way into your subconscious. So I think it's the same thing with even anything, a song, a movie, a personality. If you keep doing that and you keep embedding into people's subconscious, they'll remember you and maybe want to try your film or take you seriously, or that's what I think. It's important to just keep but without being annoying to the point where people just want to get rid of you.
Right, of course. Yeah, that's the cardinal rule of networking. Don't be annoying, right? Um,
That one, yeah.
with that being said, you've got some products coming up. You mentioned the Blu-rays coming out. Which Blu-rays? How many Blu-rays? And do you have any release dates yet?
Yeah, I can only tell you certain things. I'm not allowed to divulge the names of the distributors, but I could give you one of them is Guilty Pleasures.
Hmm.
It's due out next year. I could tell you that much.
Okay.
And actress Sasha Graham, who is um an actress of many of these shot video films, who's now a published tarot author.
Hmm.
And such. That's her big thing now. Is she's a writer. She was in the film, and she's also on this Blu-ray. And she's wonderful to listen to, and just in anything. So just keep her in mind. That's another name you'll see everywhere now, Sasha Graham.
Hmm.
And the 80s movies I did, Screen Book 2, Maligno, It's Only a Movie, they're also coming out next year from a different label, and they should be out around spring. So look for that.
Okay.
And one thing also, in addition, one of the ways I pay the bills is I do a lot of transcribing of for film books, but one I'm actually editing is for the guy who wrote who made Penny Dreadful. It is Brian Norton's book on the Amityville horror movies. It's called For God's Sake, Get Out. And it's like maybe Bear Manor Media is releasing it. It's a beautiful color coffee table book, the most incredible scrapbook of anything and everything Amityville that you always wanted to know. Everything about the De Laurentiis, everything is in there. And that's coming out October 10th of next year, 2023, which will be here before you know, because time does fly.
Hmm.
And so those are things to look forward to next year. No new acting roles, but definitely product coming out.
Great, great. If you could go back to visit yourself in Long Island and Manhasset when you're first getting started, when you were first making Screenbook and Guilty Pleasures and Five Dead on the Crimson Canvas, what advice would you give yourself?
Okay, a few things. One, well, I would say this to any filmmaker, basically. Also, keep your credit scores clean. Here at start. Really, I always say that's one thing that does help along the way, because if you muddle that up somewhere, it's gonna make it hard for you to make other movies. Yeah. Always try to keep your funds. Always try to keep your financial situation strong, because that will help you. It'd be like an extra cushion while you're making films, because that's one of the hardest things. Is finding yourself having to work 20 jobs to pay for this and also pay for that. And try to give yourself at least some kind of financial strength somewhere. So I would say the first step is keep your your credit score clean. Try to keep some dollars in the bank. That always helps.
Mhm.
And make sure that whenever you go into any project, give it 500% of yourself. You can't be. I also, one thing I also deal with a lot of perfectionists, which I have nothing against perfectionism, but I don't like people who have to do two things and then they pause for a month. Two things and they pause for a month. I can't work with people like that. It's like, this perfectionism and it's just taking forever.
Mhm.
So I would say you have to be completely focused. You have to be completely committed to your project, but also, again, like going back to the whole thing with Nikos, you have to be on the same page as everyone else, and it has to be a synergy. So you have to work with good people that are going to help you make a good product, and no one's going to work against you or be difficult. There has to be some kind of harmony, especially when everything is much harder in real life to deal with. So least have that. So financial stability and working with good people who are on the same page as you, and going with reasonable expectations. Also, you can't write scripts that could contain elements that you're never going to do, like helicopter crashes and explosions, things you could never do with no money.
Mhm.
You have to be reasonable there, because then there's always disappointments, and then there's always things getting compromised. So go in knowing what you have and try to take the best, take what you have, and make the very, very best of it. 'Cause that's solid producing also, because then your product will look good and won't look like, what were they trying to do? What were they trying to pass this place off as? Or you call that an effect, or
Don't overreach and underdeliver.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, in that case, thank you so much, Joe. Have a great evening.
And you too. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And that is Season 3, Episode 11 of the Producers Lounge podcast. Thank you to my guest, Joe Zaso, for joining us. You can find out more about him by checking out the show notes and subscribing to our YouTube channel at Greater Grander. Our intro and outro music today was Kumasi Groove by Kevin MacLeod. Our episode still image is by Ricardo Tomas on Greater and Grander. We love to hear from you, and you can check out this week's accompanying article on greaterandgrander.com entitled 13 Classic Movie Monsters in the Public Domain, a goldmine for creative business marketing. Link in the show notes. You can stay up to date by following us on YouTube and social media at the handle Greater Grander, all one word. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever fine podcasts are found. And also, if you like what we do, share this podcast with a friend who you think will enjoy it. Join us next week for more cocktails and questions, and until then, keep producing dreams.